Daniel Hayes stood at the large window of his ship, looking out into the darkness of space. He was the captain of the Valiant, one of the biggest ships in the human fleet. Behind him, the control room buzzed with quiet activity as his crew worked at their stations. But Daniel wasn't paying attention to any of that. His eyes were fixed on the hologram floating in front of him. The hologram showed Earth. Not the Earth of today, but the Earth of 3,000 years ago. Blue oceans covered most of the planet. Green and brown land masses sat between them. White clouds swirled in beautiful patterns. It was the Earth his ancestors had called home. The Earth they had been forced to leave when the Crithians came. Daniel had never seen the real Earth. None of the current generation had. They were all born in space, on ships that had been traveling through the galaxy for 3 millennia. But every child grew up hearing the stories. They learned about the blue skies and the smell of rain. They learned about forests and mountains and oceans that seemed to go on forever. And they learned about the day the Crithians arrived. The Crithians were an insect-like alien race. They had built a massive empire by conquering other worlds. When they found Earth, they wanted it for themselves. The humans tried to fight back, but they weren't ready. Their weapons were too weak. Their ships were too slow. In just a few months, the Crithians destroyed everything. They burned the forests. They boiled the oceans. They poisoned the air. And they killed billions of humans. Only a few million escaped. They fled into space in whatever ships they could find. For 3,000 years, they had been running, hiding, and growing stronger. Now everything was about to change. Maya Griffin walked into the observation room. She was Daniel's second in command, a smart woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Captain, the council is ready for you," she said. Daniel turned away from the hologram. "Thank you, Maya. Let's not keep them waiting." The council chamber was located in the center of the Valiant. It was a large circular room with a table in the middle. Around that table sat the leaders of the human fleet. These were the people who made the big decisions, who planned for the future of their race. Admiral Craig Patterson sat at the head of the table. He was an old man with gray hair and a face marked by years of war. Craig had spent his entire life fighting small battles against Crithian outposts scattered across the galaxy. He had won most of those battles, but they were nothing compared to what was being discussed today. "Thank you all for coming," Craig said as Daniel took his seat. "I'll get straight to the point. Our scouts have returned from Crithian space. What they've found changes everything." He pressed a button on the table and a map appeared in the air above them. It showed hundreds of star systems, all marked with different colors. Red marks showed Crithian-controlled space. It was a huge area, covering a large part of the galaxy. But there was something strange about the map. The red areas weren't solid anymore. They were broken up, divided by lines and barriers. Some sections were marked in different shades, showing conflict and division. Commander Lisa Brooks leaned forward to study the map. She was in charge of military planning. A woman who understood strategy better than anyone else in the fleet. "Civil war," she said quietly. Craig nodded. "Exactly. The Crithian Empire is tearing itself apart. Different factions are fighting for control. Their military is divided. Their resources are stretched thin. And most importantly, many of their conquered worlds are being forgotten in the chaos." "Including Earth," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. "Including Earth," Craig confirmed. "Our scouts got close enough to scan the system. There's still a Crithian presence there, but it's small. A garrison force of about 5,000 soldiers. They're using Earth as a listening post, nothing more. The planet itself is still dead, still poisoned, but it's in contested space. None of the Crithian factions consider it important enough to fight over." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. For 3,000 years, humanity had been too weak to go home. The Crithian Empire had been too strong, too vast. Any attempt to retake Earth would have resulted in total destruction. But now the Empire was weak. Now there was a chance. Lisa spoke up. "What's our current strength?" Daniel had the numbers memorized. 200 warships ranging from destroyers to battle cruisers, 30,000 trained soldiers, 500 fighter craft, and 3 million civilians spread across our colony ships. "And our technology?" asked Colonel Andrew Carter, the leader of the ground forces. "Superior to what the Crithians had 3,000 years ago," Lisa answered. "We've been developing weapons and defenses specifically designed to fight them. We've studied every battle, every defeat our ancestors suffered. We know their weaknesses now." Craig stood up, placing his hands on the table. "The question before us is simple. Do we try to reclaim Earth? Do we go home?" Nobody spoke for a long moment. Going back to Earth meant war. It meant risking everything they had built over 3 millennia. If they failed, the Crithians might hunt down the rest of the fleet. Humanity could be completely destroyed. But if they succeeded, they would have a home again. A real planet, not just ships drifting through space. They would have Earth. One by one, the council members voted. One by one, they said yes. When it was Daniel's turn, he thought about all the stories he had heard as a child. He thought about the hologram of the blue planet. He thought about his ancestors who had died fighting, and those who had died fleeing. Yes, he said firmly. We go home. The vote was unanimous. Craig smiled for the first time in months. Then we have work to do. Lisa, I want battle plans prepared. Andrew, start training exercises for ground combat. Daniel, coordinate with the colony ships. Everyone needs to be ready. How long do we have? Someone asked. I want to move in 6 months, Craig replied. We'll take our time getting there, scout ahead, make sure we know exactly what we're facing. But once we arrive, we hit them fast and hard. We don't give them time to call for help. We don't give them time to reinforce. We take Earth back in one strike. The meeting continued for hours as they discussed details and strategies. When it finally ended, Daniel found himself back at the observation window looking at the hologram of Earth once more. Maya joined him. Are you scared? She asked. Daniel considered the question. No, he said finally. I'm angry. 3,000 years, Maya. 3,000 years we've been wandering. 3,000 years we've been refugees with no home. The Crithians took everything from us. They thought they could destroy us completely. They almost did, Maya pointed out. Almost, Daniel agreed. But we survived. And we didn't just survive, we grew stronger. We learned. We prepared. And now we're going to show them what happens when you try to destroy humanity. He turned to face her. Spread the word to the crew. Tell them we're going home. Tell them to get ready, because in 6 months we're going to war. Maya saluted and left to carry out his orders. Daniel stayed at the window a while longer, watching the hologram. Soon he thought that hologram would be replaced by the real thing. Soon he would stand on the surface of Earth itself. The Crithians had made a mistake 3,000 years ago. They had left survivors. They had let humanity escape. That mistake was about to cost them everything. The fleet began to prepare. In the shipyards, workers started building more weapons and repairing old damage. In the training rooms, soldiers practiced combat drills. In the schools, children learned about the planet they would soon call home. Everyone had a job to do, and everyone knew what was at stake. Daniel spent his days planning and his nights studying old Earth history. He read about wars fought on the distant planet, about nations that rose and fell, about humans who had faced impossible odds and won anyway. He wanted to understand what it meant to be from Earth, to have roots in soil instead of metal. 6 months would pass quickly, he knew, and then the real test would begin. Humanity would return to Earth not as refugees but as warriors. They would face the Crithians one more time, and this time humanity would win. The journey took 7 months instead of 6. Admiral Craig Patterson wanted to be careful. He sent small scout ships ahead of the main fleet, making sure there were no Crithian patrols waiting to spot them. The scouts reported back regularly. The path to Earth was clear. When the fleet finally reached the edge of the solar system, Daniel Hayes gave the order to drop out of faster-than-light travel. The ships appeared in normal space near Neptune, far enough away that sensors wouldn't detect them immediately. From here they could see the inner planets. Mars was still there, a red dot in the distance. Ancient records said that humans had started colonies on Mars before the Crithians came. Those colonies were destroyed in the first week of the invasion. Now Mars was just another dead rock orbiting the sun. Jupiter looked the same as it always had, a giant ball of gas with its many moons. But those moons told a story of violence. Sensors showed massive craters and radiation signatures. The Crithians had bombed them from orbit, making sure no human settlements survived. And then there was Earth itself. Daniel stood on the bridge of the Valiant, staring at the view screen. His hands gripped the railing tightly. After 3,000 years, humanity was looking at its homeworld again. But Earth didn't look like the holograms. The beautiful blue planet was gone. Instead, Daniel saw a gray-brown sphere wrapped in thick clouds. The oceans weren't blue anymore. The continents were barely visible through the toxic atmosphere. This was what the Crithians had done. They had killed an entire planet. Maya Griffin stood beside him, her face pale. "Is that really Earth?" she whispered. "According to the navigational data, yes," Daniel replied. His voice was tight with emotion. "That's home." Colonel Andrew Carter joined them on the bridge. He was a big man with a square jaw and cold eyes. Andrew commanded all the ground forces, and he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. "What's the plan, Captain?" he asked. Daniel pulled up the tactical display. It showed Earth and the space around it. Red markers indicated Crithian positions. There was a small fleet of ships in orbit, maybe 20 vessels. On the surface, concentrated in the northern continent, was the garrison force the scouts had reported. "We need information before we attack," Daniel said. "Andrew, I want you to take a small team down to the surface. Land somewhere away from the Crithian base. See what condition the planet is in. Find out if it's even possible for us to survive there." Andrew nodded. "I'll take my best people." "When do we leave?" "Tonight. Use a stealth shuttle. Get in, gather data, and get out. Don't engage the Crithians unless you have no choice." 6 hours later, Andrew stood in the shuttle bay checking his equipment one last time. He had chosen 9 soldiers to go with him. Among them was Sergeant Nicole Palmer, an expert in environmental science, and Lieutenant Kevin Ross, who specialized in tactical intelligence. The stealth shuttle was a small black craft designed to avoid detection. It had minimal weapons but powerful engines and the best sensor-blocking technology humanity had developed. As they launched from the Valiant, the shuttle's systems activated, making it almost invisible to enemy scanners. The trip down to Earth's surface was tense. They passed through the orbital defense grid without being detected, but everyone knew that could change at any moment. The Crithians might have improved their sensors over the centuries. One wrong move and the mission would be over. The shuttle entered Earth's atmosphere. Immediately, warning lights started flashing. The air outside was toxic, filled with chemicals and radiation. Nicole studied her instruments carefully. "Radiation is high but not lethal," she reported. "Our suits will protect us. But nobody could live here without protection." They descended through the thick clouds. Below them, the landscape slowly came into view. Andrew had chosen to land in what old maps called North America. According to records, this area had once been covered in forests and grasslands. Now it was a wasteland. The shuttle touched down in a flat area surrounded by ruins. Broken buildings jutted up from the dust like broken bones. Streets were cracked and buried under centuries of dirt. This had been a city once, home to thousands or maybe millions of people. Now it was a tomb. Andrew opened the shuttle door and stepped out onto Earth for the first time. His boots crunched on the dry ground. Above him, the sky was a sickly yellow-brown color. The air smelled of chemicals even through his helmet filters. This was Earth, the planet his ancestors had loved and lost. "Spread out," he ordered his team. "Nicole, I want a full environmental scan. Kevin, look for any Crithian activity. Everyone else, search the ruins. Look for anything useful, any records or artifacts that survived." The team split up, moving carefully through the dead city. Andrew walked down what had once been a main street. On either side, buildings stood like hollow shells. Windows were empty. Doors hung off their hinges. Everything was covered in dust. He found a building that looked more intact than the others and went inside. The interior was dark, lit only by the light from his helmet. Furniture lay scattered and broken. Pictures hung crooked on the walls, their images faded beyond recognition. This had been someone's home. Andrew continued deeper into the building. In what might have been a bedroom, he found a skeleton. It was small, probably a child. The bones were arranged peacefully, as if the person had just laid down and never woken up. Andrew stood there for a long moment, thinking about the day the Crithians came. How many people had died like this, alone and afraid? His radio crackled. "Colonel, you need to see this," Kevin's voice said. Andrew left the building and followed Kevin's position marker. The lieutenant was standing near the edge of the city, pointing at something in the distance. Andrew looked where he was pointing and saw it. A massive structure made of dark stone, standing alone in the wasteland. They approached it carefully. As they got closer, Andrew realized what it was. A memorial. The stone was carved with names, thousands and thousands of names. Maybe millions. These were the people who had died when Earth fell. The survivors had built this before fleeing into space, a way to remember those they were leaving behind. Andrew placed his hand on the stone. The surface was rough and weathered, but the names were still readable. He didn't recognize any of them, but it didn't matter. These were his people, his ancestors. They had died defending their world. "Colonel," Nicole called out. She was standing nearby holding her scanner. "I've completed the environmental analysis. The news isn't good. The atmosphere is still toxic. Radiation levels are elevated across the entire planet. The oceans are dead, filled with chemical waste. Plant life is completely extinct. Can the planet be saved?" Andrew asked. Nicole hesitated. "Maybe. With enough time and resources, we could start terraforming operations. Clean the air, purify the water, reintroduce plant life. But it would take decades, maybe centuries. Earth won't be livable in our lifetime." Andrew nodded slowly. He had expected as much. The Crithians had been thorough in their destruction. Kevin spoke up. "Sir, I've located the Crithian garrison. It's about 200 miles north of here. They've built a fortress near what used to be called the Canadian border. Sensors show approximately 5,000 soldiers, along with automated defenses and a communications array." "Are they aware of us?" Andrew asked. "No signs that they've detected our presence. They seem focused on monitoring space traffic, not looking for threats on the surface." Andrew made a decision. "We're going to take a closer look at that fortress. I want to know exactly what we're up against." They returned to the shuttle and flew north, staying low to avoid detection. The landscape below was monotonous, just endless wasteland, broken occasionally by the ruins of old cities. After an hour, they reached the Crithian fortress. It was an ugly thing, all sharp angles and dark metal. It looked like a cancer growing on Earth's surface. Lights glowed in the windows and sensor arrays rotated slowly on the roof. This was the enemy, the invaders who had stolen humanity's home. Kevin recorded everything. The fortress's layout, the placement of weapons, the location of the power generators. This information would be vital when the attack came. "I'm picking up something else," Nicole said suddenly. She pointed to a spot about a mile from the fortress. "There's a landing pad there. And ships. Small Crithian transport vessels." Andrew studied the area through his binoculars. 6 ships sat on the landing pad, ready to take off at a moment's notice. They were probably used for supply runs and patrols. "Mark their position," Andrew said. "Those ships need to be destroyed first. If even one of them escapes and sends a distress signal, we'll have the entire Crithian military coming down on us." They watched the fortress for another hour, gathering as much information as possible. Then Andrew gave the order to return to the fleet. They had what they needed. The flight back up through the atmosphere was quiet. Everyone was thinking about what they had seen. Earth was dead, but it wasn't gone. It could be brought back to life, given time. But first they had to deal with the Crithians. When the shuttle docked with the Valiant, Daniel was waiting for them. "What did you find?" he asked. Andrew handed him a datapad with all their recordings and scans. "Earth is worse than we thought, but not beyond hope. The Crithian garrison is exactly where the scouts said it was. 5,000 soldiers, decent." General Amy Rodriguez stood in the war room of the command ship. Around her, holographic displays showed every detail of the Crithian fortress on Earth's surface. She had been studying these images for 3 days straight, planning every aspect of the coming attack. Amy was known throughout the fleet as a brilliant tactician. She never rushed into battle. She planned everything carefully, thought through every possibility, and only attacked when she was certain of victory. But this wasn't just another battle. This was Earth, this was personal. "The key is speed," she told the assembled officers. "The Crithians have a communications array that can send signals across light years. If they get a distress call out, we'll have enemy reinforcements arriving within days. We cannot let that happen." Captain Nathan Bell nodded. He commanded Alpha Strike Team, one of 4 special forces units that would lead the attack. Nathan was a quiet man with steady hands and cold eyes. He had spent 20 years training for ground combat against the Crithians. "What's the plan, General?" he asked. Amy highlighted several points on the holographic fortress. "We'll hit them at dawn local time. 4 strike teams will approach from different directions. Alpha and Beta teams will take out the communications array and power generators. Charlie and Delta teams will assault the main gates and draw their attention. Once we have control of the fortress, the regular army will land and secure the area." "What about their ships?" asked Corporal Lauren Hayes. She was part of Alpha Team, a demolitions expert who could turn anything into a bomb. "The fighter squadrons will handle the ships," Amy replied. "Commander Victoria Lang's pilots will destroy them before they can take off. Nobody escapes. Nobody calls for help." The briefing continued for another hour. Every team member learned their specific role. Everyone knew what had to be done. When it was over, Nathan gathered Alpha Team for their own meeting. There were 12 of them in total. Lauren with her explosives, Kyle Sherman, a sniper who never missed, Helen Drake, a medic who had saved more lives than she could count, and 9 others, all highly trained, all ready to fight. "Listen up," Nathan said. "In 6 hours we're going to set foot on Earth. Our ancestors died on that planet. They died protecting their homes, their families, their way of life. We're going down there to finish what they started. We're going to kill every single Crithian on that planet, and then we're going to take our world back." He looked each team member in the eye. "Are you ready?" "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. 6 hours later, the assault began. 4 dropships fell through Earth's toxic atmosphere like meteors. Each one carried a strike team. They flew low and fast, using the terrain to hide from sensors. The Crithian fortress appeared on their screens, lit up by floodlights in the pre-dawn darkness. Nathan sat in the lead dropship with Alpha Team, checking his weapon one last time. It was a rifle designed specifically to penetrate Crithian armor, powered by technology developed over 3,000 years of exile. Next to him, Lauren was going through her pack of explosives, making sure everything was ready. 2 minutes to landing zone, the pilot announced. The dropships split up, each heading to their assigned position. Alpha and Beta teams landed on the east side of the fortress, hidden behind the ruins of an old human settlement. Charlie and Delta teams landed on the west side, preparing for their frontal assault. Nathan led his team through the ruins. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. They had to move quickly. The Crithians would be changing guard shifts soon. The perfect time to strike when they were distracted. They reached the edge of the fortress. Up close, it looked even more imposing. The walls were 30 feet high and smooth as glass. Guard towers rose at each corner, equipped with automated weapons. Spotlights swept back and forth across the ground. "Lauren, you're up," Nathan whispered. The demolitions expert crept forward, staying in the shadows. She reached the wall and placed a small device against it. The device was a molecular disruptor, capable of breaking down the bonds that held metal together. She activated it and hurried back to the team. Nothing seemed to happen at first. Then the wall began to shimmer. A section 10 feet wide simply dissolved, leaving a hole into the fortress interior. "Go, go, go!" Nathan commanded. Alpha Team poured through the opening. They found themselves in a storage area, filled with crates and equipment. Alarms started blaring immediately. The Crithians knew something was wrong. Kyle took up position near a window and started shooting. His rifle was fitted with a silencer, and each shot was perfectly aimed. Crithian soldiers fell before they even knew where the attack was coming from. Nathan led the rest of the team deeper into the fortress. According to their intelligence, the communications array was located in the central tower. They had to reach it before the Crithians could send a distress signal. They moved through corridors filled with the enemy. The Crithians were insect-like creatures, each one about 7 feet tall with 4 arms and hard black shells. They carried weapons that fired energy blasts. But Alpha Team was ready for them. Helen threw a grenade that exploded in a burst of electromagnetic energy. The blast fried the Crithians' electronic weapons, turning them into useless chunks of metal. Nathan and his team opened fire with their rifles, cutting through the enemy like paper. "Communications tower ahead," Lauren shouted. They burst into a large room filled with equipment. Crithian technicians scrambled for weapons, but they were too slow. Nathan shot them down without hesitation. Lauren immediately went to work, placing explosives on every piece of equipment. "Charges set," she announced. 30 seconds. The team ran from the room. Behind them, the explosives detonated in a massive blast. The communications array was destroyed. The Crithians couldn't call for help now. On the other side of the fortress, Charlie and Delta teams were making their own assault. They attacked the main gates with heavy weapons, drawing the attention of the Crithian defenders. It was a dangerous job, but necessary. While the Crithians focused on the frontal assault, Alpha and Beta teams were able to work behind their lines. General Amy Rodriguez watched the battle from orbit, coordinating all the different elements. Fighter craft streaked through the sky, targeting the Crithian ships on the landing pad. Missiles streaked down, turning the spacecraft into balls of fire. None of them escaped. Beta team reports the power generators are destroyed, an officer announced. "The fortress is running on backup power only," Amy nodded. "Send in the regular forces. It's time to finish this." Dropships began landing around the fortress, each one carrying dozens of human soldiers. They poured out and joined the battle. The Crithians fought back fiercely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Without power for their heavy weapons and without any way to call for reinforcements, they were doomed. Nathan found himself in the fortress command center. The Crithian commander was there, a large specimen with scars across its shell. It raised a weapon, but Kyle shot it down from across the room. The commander fell without making a sound. The battle lasted 3 more hours. Slowly, the Crithian resistance collapsed. They fought room by room, floor by floor, but it was hopeless. Human forces swept through the fortress like a tide, clearing out every corner. By noon, it was over. 5,000 Crithian soldiers lay dead. The fortress was in human hands. Not a single enemy had escaped. Nathan walked out of the fortress into the sunlight. The sky was still that sickly yellow-brown color, but it didn't matter. This was Earth, this was home, and for the first time in 3,000 years, humans controlled it again. General Amy Rodriguez's voice came through his helmet radio. "All teams, this is command. Excellent work. The fortress is ours. Earth is ours." Cheers erupted across the communication channels. Soldiers who had never set foot on a planet before today were celebrating on the surface of humanity's homeworld. Some knelt and touched the ground. Others just stood there, taking it all in. Nathan looked at his team. They were exhausted, covered in dust and blood, but they were smiling. Lauren came up beside him. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it." "This was just the first step," Nathan replied. "The Crithians will come back when they realize this base has gone silent. We need to be ready." But for now, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first battle for Earth had been won. The Crithians had thought they could use humanity's homeworld as a listening post, a forgotten corner of their dying empire. They were wrong. Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Valiant, looking down at Earth from orbit. The fortress was marked on his displays, now showing green for human control. Around him, his crew was celebrating. Maya Griffin approached with a tablet. "Casualty report, Captain. We lost 47 soldiers in the assault. Another 112 wounded." Daniel's expression darkened. 47 people would never see Earth fully restored. But 5,000 Crithians had died, and that was just the beginning. "Make sure the families are notified," he said. "Those 47 died as heroes. They'll be remembered." "Yes, sir." Admiral Craig Patterson appeared on the view screen. The old admiral looked tired but satisfied. "Daniel, congratulations. The operation was a complete success. Earth is ours." "Thank you, sir." "What are your orders?" Craig smiled. "Begin landing the colony ships. Start bringing people down." 6 months passed after the liberation of Earth. During that time, humanity worked harder than ever before. The colony ships landed one by one, bringing 3 million people to the surface. They built temporary habitats with air filtration systems to protect against the toxic atmosphere. Engineers began the long process of terraforming, setting up machines that would slowly clean the air and purify the water. But Admiral Craig Patterson knew this peace wouldn't last. The Crithians had lost contact with their garrison. Eventually, they would send someone to investigate. That's why Craig spent those 6 months preparing Earth's defenses. The moon became a fortress. Weapons batteries were carved into the gray rock, hidden from view but ready to fire at any moment. Missile silos dotted the lunar surface. Fighter squadrons were stationed in underground hangars. If the Crithians came looking for a fight, they would find one. Mars was transformed as well. The old ruined colonies were rebuilt as shipyards. Foundries worked day and night, producing new warships and fighters. Raw materials were mined from the asteroid belt and processed into weapons and armor. Humanity's industrial capacity had never been higher. Colonel Victoria Lang commanded the fighter wings. She was a woman in her 30s with short red hair and a reputation as the best pilot in the fleet. Victoria had been flying since she was 16 years old. She understood space combat better than anyone alive. "How many fighters do we have operational?" Craig asked during one of their planning sessions. 800, Victoria replied, "and we're producing more every week. The Mars shipyards are working at full capacity." Craig studied the tactical displays. They showed the solar system with all of humanity's defenses marked. It was impressive, but he wasn't sure it would be enough. "What do you think the Crithians will send?" "If they follow standard procedure, a response fleet of 50 to 60 ships. Heavy cruisers mostly with destroyer escorts, maybe a battleship if they think the threat is serious enough. Can we handle that many? Victoria smiled coldly. We've spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment, Admiral. Yes, we can handle them. The Crithian response fleet arrived 7 months after the garrison fell silent. They came out of faster-than-light travel near Pluto, far enough away that they could scan the system before committing to an attack. Commander Peter Walsh was monitoring sensors when they appeared. Admiral, we have contacts, he announced. 61 ships, Crithian configuration. They're holding position near Pluto. Craig immediately activated the fleet-wide alert. Across the solar system, human ships powered up their weapons and engines. Fighter pilots ran to their craft. Ground forces manned the defense batteries. Everyone knew this day was coming. What are they doing? Craig asked. Scanning, Peter replied. They're trying to figure out what happened to their garrison. Let them look. They won't find anything we don't want them to see. The Crithians had no idea that Earth was now a trap. When they looked at the planet, their sensors showed the same dead world that had been there for 3,000 years. The fortress appeared abandoned with no power signatures or life signs. It looked like the garrison had simply vanished. After 2 hours of scanning, the Crithian fleet began moving toward Earth. They advanced carefully, weapons ready, expecting some kind of ambush. But they were looking in the wrong places. They expected an attack from other Crithian factions fighting for control of the Empire. They never imagined that humanity had returned. The fleet passed Mars without noticing the shipyards hidden on the far side of the planet. They passed the asteroid belt without seeing the mining stations that had shut down all their systems to avoid detection. They approached Earth, and still they saw nothing that alarmed them. Craig watched their progress on his displays. Wait for it, he said quietly. Let them get close. The Crithian ships entered orbit around Earth. Their sensors swept across the planet looking for answers. They found the fortress, now clearly destroyed in battle. They found human settlements on the surface. And finally, they understood. They're charging weapons, Peter reported. They're preparing to bombard the surface. Now, Craig ordered. The moon lit up like a star. Hidden weapons batteries fired all at once, launching hundreds of missiles at the Crithian fleet. The missiles were fast and heavily shielded, designed to penetrate enemy defenses. They slammed into Crithian ships with devastating force. 3 ships exploded immediately, torn apart by multiple missile impacts. 5 more were damaged, their shields failing and hulls breached. The Crithian formation broke as they tried to respond to this unexpected attack. Launch all fighters, Victoria commanded. From the moon, from Mars, from hidden stations throughout the system, fighter craft poured out. 800 small, fast ships streaked toward the enemy like a swarm of angry insects. Victoria led them personally, her fighter at the head of the formation. The Crithians tried to reorganize, but the human attack gave them no time. The fighters darted through their formation, targeting engines and weapons. They were outnumbered but far more maneuverable. A Crithian heavy cruiser tried to target a human fighter, but the small craft simply twisted aside. Its pilot, Lieutenant Grace Turner, fired 2 missiles that struck the cruiser's bridge. The massive ship went dark, drifting helplessly. Focus on the battleship, Victoria ordered. Take down their flagship. The Crithian battleship was enormous, nearly a mile long. Its hull was covered in weapons and armor. It was designed to destroy entire fleets, but it was also slow and hard to maneuver. The human fighters swarmed it from all sides. Kyle Sherman was flying one of those fighters. He had left his sniper rifle behind for this battle, trading it for the controls of a spacecraft. He dove toward the battleship, dodging energy blasts that tried to shoot him down. His targeting computer locked onto the ship's main reactor. Torpedo away, he announced. The torpedo was tiny compared to the battleship, but it was enough. It punched through the armor and detonated inside the reactor chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire ship exploded in a ball of light so bright it could be seen from Earth's surface. The destruction of their flagship broke the Crithian fleet's morale. Some ships tried to run. Others tried to fight. None of it mattered. Human warships had joined the battle now, emerging from hiding spots throughout the system. 200 ships against what remained of the Crithian force. Commander Peter Walsh commanded the Liberty, a destroyer with advanced weapon systems. He targeted a Crithian cruiser that was trying to escape. Fire all forward guns, he ordered. Energy beams lanced out, cutting through the cruiser's engines. The ship tumbled out of control, dead in space. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The Crithians had walked into a trap, and now they were paying the price. They had expected to find a silent garrison. and instead found an entire human civilization ready for war. The battle lasted 3 days. It wasn't because the Crithians were winning. It was because they kept trying to run, and human forces kept hunting them down. Craig had given clear orders. Nobody escapes. Not a single ship could be allowed to return to Crithian space with news of what had happened here. On the 3rd day, the last Crithian ship was destroyed. It was a small transport that had been hiding in the rings of Saturn, hoping to slip away unnoticed. Grace Turner found it with her patrol and ended it with a single missile. All enemy contacts destroyed, Peter reported. The system is clear. Craig sat back in his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 70 years. They had won. 61 Crithian ships destroyed, thousands of enemy soldiers dead, and on the human side, the casualties were relatively light. 42 ships damaged, 12 destroyed completely, 800 soldiers and pilots lost. It was a victory, but Craig knew what it meant. The Crithians would send another fleet when this one failed to report back, and another after that. This war was just beginning. Daniel Hayes came to visit Craig in his office after the battle. The younger man looked tired but satisfied. "We bloodied their nose," Daniel said. "We did more than that," Craig replied. "We showed them that humanity isn't prey anymore. We're predators now. What happens next?" Craig pulled up a star chart showing Crithian space. The red areas were still vast, even though the Civil War was tearing the Empire apart. "We keep fighting. We don't give them time to organize a proper response. We attack their outposts, destroy their ships, liberate their conquered worlds. We show the galaxy that the Crithian Empire is finished." "That's a long war," Daniel observed. "We've got time," Craig said. 3,000 years we've been waiting for this. We can wait a little longer to finish it." Down on Earth's surface, the colonists watched the debris from the battle streak across the sky like shooting stars. The pieces of destroyed Crithian ships burned up in the atmosphere, creating light shows that lasted for hours. Nathan Bell stood outside one of the temporary habitats watching the display. Lauren Hayes was beside him, as she had been throughout the ground campaign and the space battle. "It's beautiful," Lauren said quietly. "It's justice," Nathan replied. "Every one of those shooting stars is a Crithian ship. That's 61 fewer threats to Earth. Do you think we can really win this war?" Nathan looked at her. "I know we can. The Crithians are divided, and the war consumed 20 years. It was fought across hundreds of star systems on countless worlds, and in the vast empty spaces between them. But unlike the first war 3,000 years ago, this time humanity was winning. Admiral Daniel Hayes, now in his 50s, commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled. 2,000 warships bearing the banner of Earth. They weren't fighting alone anymore either. Over the years, other races who had suffered under Crithian rule joined the cause. The alliance grew stronger with each victory. But there was one target that had remained untouched throughout all those years of warfare. Crythia Prime, the homeworld of the species that had destroyed Earth. It was heavily defended, protected by what remained of the Crithian military. Every attempt to attack it had been turned back with heavy losses. Until now. Daniel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destiny, looking at the tactical display. Around him, the fleet was assembled in battle formation. 2,000 human ships and another 500 vessels from allied races. The largest military force ever brought together for a single battle. General Lisa Brooks was with him. She had aged as well, her hair now streaked with gray, but her mind was still sharp as ever. "Are you sure about this, Daniel?" she asked quietly. "No," he admitted. "But it has to be done. As long as Crythia Prime stands, the war continues. We end it today." The fleet advanced toward the Crithian homeworld. As they approached, enemy ships began to appear on sensors. Hundreds of them, the last defenders of a dying empire. They formed up in defensive positions around their planet, ready to fight to the last ship. Commander Peter Walsh, now an admiral himself, commanded a squadron of heavy cruisers. He studied the enemy formation and shook his head. "They're going to make us fight for every inch." "Let them," Daniel replied over the fleet-wide channel. "We've come too far to stop now. All ships advance. Engage at will." The two fleets collided in the space above Crythia Prime. It was chaos on a scale never seen before. Ships fired weapons in all directions. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy beams crisscrossed the battlefield. Fighters darted between the capital ships like schools of fish. Victoria Lang, now a full commander with gray streaks in her red hair, led the fighter wings as she had for 2 decades. Her skills hadn't diminished with age. If anything, she was better now, her reflexes enhanced by years of combat experience. "Gold Squadron, focus on those destroyers," she commanded. "Silver Squadron, protect our cruisers. Bronze Squadron, you're with me. We're taking out that carrier." The Crithian carrier was launching fighters as fast as it could. Victoria's squadron dove toward it, weaving through defensive fire. Brandon Cole, her second-in-command now, flew on her wing. "Like old times, Commander," he said with a grin in his voice. "Just like old times," Victoria agreed. "Except this time, we're ending the war." They fired missiles that punched through the carrier's launch bays, detonating inside. Secondary explosions ripped through the massive ship. It broke apart, spilling fighters and debris into space. On the ground, General Amy Rodriguez was preparing for the surface assault. She was older now, too, but still sharp and focused. 200,000 soldiers waited in the troop transports, ready to land once the fleet secured orbital superiority. Colonel Andrew Carter stood beside her. He had fought on Earth 20 years ago, in the first battle to reclaim humanity's home. Now he was about to fight on the Crithian homeworld, in the battle that would end the war. "Do you think they'll surrender?" he asked. "No," Amy said simply. "They'll fight to the end. That's who they are." "Good," Andrew replied coldly. "So will we." The space battle raged for 12 hours. Slowly, the human alliance gained the upper hand. The Crithians fought bravely, defending their home with everything they had. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, their ships fell silent. Daniel watched as the last Crithian battleship exploded. "All ships cease fire. Begin landing operations." The troop transports descended through Crithia Prime's atmosphere. The planet below was nothing like Earth. It was darker, colder, with purple vegetation and black oceans. Cities built from dark metal covered the surface, connected by massive transportation networks. Andrew's forces landed near the capital city. The Crithians had ground forces waiting for them, but the battle was already lost. Human soldiers, hardened by 20 years of warfare, swept through the defenses like a tide. They had better weapons, better tactics, and most importantly, they had something the Crithians had lost long ago: hope for the future. The fighting in the capital city lasted 2 days. The Crithians made them pay for every street, every building, but eventually human forces reached the center of the city, where the Crithian government complex stood. Nathan Bell led the final assault on the complex. He was older now, his hair going gray, but he was still one of the best soldiers in the human military. Lauren Hayes was with him as always. They had fought side by side for 20 years, from Earth to this final battle. The Crithian leaders were waiting in the main chamber. They were the last of their kind's government, the final remnants of an empire that once controlled a quarter of the galaxy. They stood proud, refusing to show fear even in defeat. Daniel Hayes entered the chamber, flanked by guards. He looked at the Crithian leaders for a long moment. These creatures had ordered the destruction of Earth. They had killed billions of humans. For 3,000 years, humanity had dreamed of this moment. "It's over," Daniel said simply. The lead Crithian, an old creature with scars across its shell, spoke in a clicking language that was translated by computers. "We will never surrender. Kill us if you must, but our people will remember. They will rebuild. They will return." Daniel shook his head. "No, you won't. Your empire is finished. Your military is destroyed. Your colonies are free, but I'm not here to commit genocide. That's what you did to us, but we're not like you." He activated a holographic display showing the terms he had prepared. "The Crithian Empire will be dissolved. Your colonies will become independent worlds. You will pay reparations to every species you conquered, and you will build a monument here on your homeworld, listing every race you destroyed or enslaved. Earth will be at the top of that list." The Crithian leaders looked at each other. They had expected death. Instead, they were being offered a chance to survive, diminished but alive. "And if we refuse?" one of them asked. Daniel's expression hardened. "Then we'll turn this planet into what you made of Earth. We have the weapons to do it. We've spent 3,000 years developing them. The only question is whether you want your world to survive." The Crithians had no choice. They agreed to the terms. 3 months later, Daniel stood in the center of the Crithian capital, watching as the monument was erected. It was a massive structure made of dark stone, similar to the memorial humanity had built on Earth before fleeing. But this monument was different. It listed the crimes of the Crithian Empire for all to see. At the very top, carved in letters 10 feet high, was one word: Earth. Below it were the names of the billions who had died when the Crythians came. The list went on for hundreds of feet, name after name after name. All the people who had been killed in the First War 3,000 years ago. Maya Griffin, now an admiral herself, stood beside Daniel. "Do you think this is enough?" she asked. "Can a monument really balance what they did?" "No," Daniel admitted. "Nothing can balance it. But it's a start. Future generations of Crythians will see this monument. They'll learn what their ancestors did. Maybe they'll choose a different path." Lisa Brooks joined them. She was retired now, but she had come to Crethia Prime to see the war's end with her own eyes. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Daniel said. "Back to Earth. It's been 20 years since the war started. It's time to finish healing our world." The journey back to Earth took 3 months. When the fleet finally arrived at the solar system, Daniel was struck by how much had changed. Mars was no longer just a shipyard. It was a thriving colony with millions of inhabitants. The moon base had grown into a small city, and Earth itself, beautiful Earth, was starting to turn blue again. The terraforming efforts had been ongoing throughout the war. Engineers had worked tirelessly to clean the atmosphere and purify the oceans. Plants were being reintroduced to the soil. The toxic yellow-brown clouds were breaking up, revealing blue sky beneath. Daniel took a shuttle down to the surface, landing near the old memorial where Andrew Carter had placed his hand 20 years before. The area around it had been transformed into a park, with grass and trees growing in soil that had been dead for 3 millennia. Craig Patterson was waiting for him. The old admiral was ancient now, well past 90, but he had insisted on staying alive long enough to see the war's end. "We did it," he said simply as Daniel approached. "Yes, sir. We did." Craig looked up at the sky, now showing patches of blue between the remaining clouds. "My ancestors watched this sky turn gray. They watched their world die. I never thought I'd live to see it heal." "Earth is strong," Daniel said. "It survived the Crythians. It survived 3,000 years of abandonment. And now it's coming back to life." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 old soldiers enjoying the peace they had fought so hard to achieve.